get into introducing our next speakers. Um, Jackson Wagner and Patrick Belanger are going to be talking with us about handcrafted randomness, storytelling in Wildermyth's proc gen world. So we're going to learn more about, procedural generation in narrative. Welcome so much, and take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick Belanger. I was one of the programmers and game designers on Wildermyth, and as an aside, am currently working on a multiplayer roguelike game called Begone Beast. Looks
Jackson,
like
it
we
seems
can't
like
hear
we
you,
can't hear
Jackson.
you.
I will let you know when
What
we
about
can.
now?
Yeah, that's
Hey,
better.
okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. I'm Jackson Wagner. I was a designer and game dev on Wildermyth. I am now the lead programmer and designer at Flat9 Games, and we're making a dystopic post office simulator called Letter Loss.
All right, and our presentation is called Handcrafted Randomness Storytelling in Wildermyth's Proc Gen World. So, Wildermyth, to give a brief overview, is a party-based tactical strategy storytelling RPG with randomly generated heroes, several different overarching plots, many different smaller events within each campaign, and lots of procedural generation. It was released in 2021 and was received quite well, currently has overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam. We released 2 DLCs and stopped active development on the game in mid-2024. The general flow of a Wildermyth campaign is like this. You pick a campaign and roll your party of heroes. Usually you start out with 3, more will join and some might leave throughout the campaign. The heroes are in many ways the central point of the game. They're randomly generated, but you can also customize them. There is an Overland section of gameplay where you move your heroes to different locations, reveal sites, and decide what monster groups to attack. The layout, biomes, and site types are all largely chosen procedurally. When you attack a monster group, you're brought into a turn-based tactical strategy mission. This is the meat of the gameplay and is influenced by the Overland tile and site type and sometimes events. And before and after missions, and in several other places, the story is told through comic panels. Some of these center around the campaign's overarching plot, but many are comics that can happen in any campaign. These can range from the heroes trying to decide what to make for dinner, to someone becoming one with the spirit of a ghost bear, to conversations about handling death and loss. The goal of Wildermyth could be considered many different things, but I describe the main one as creating story and character moments that feel unique to each playthrough, but also stick with the player and feel genuine. Much of how we do this involves the combination of procedurally generated and handcrafted content. Heroes, events, and maps are randomly generated or chosen, but that generation is often guided by or leads to many different pieces of handcrafted content. Heroes, events, and combat are the 3 main components of Wildermyth, and we'll be going over each of them in this presentation. Starting with heroes. As mentioned, Wildermyth is a party-based game. That means you control all of the heroes in your party, usually around 4 at the start of a campaign and generally closer to 10 by the end. I'll be talking about how they're generated and then some of what can happen to them over the course of a campaign. There's also a legacy system that lets you bring previous heroes into future campaigns, but I won't be talking about that during this talk. First off, hero generation. There are 11 personality traits that determine what a hero acts like. Poet, healer, hothead, bookish, coward, leader, romantic, loner, snark, greedy, and goofball. These are all given random values from 0 to 100, with the primary and secondary stats being the most important, and everything else mattering much less. If you try to get players to remember more than 2 personality traits on a hero, it usually just tends to dilute the hero rather than making them more interesting. Each hero starts out with some history about their upbringing and their motivations. These influence hook quests, which are little side quests focused on that hero, and stat buffs. Stat buffs from random generation are quite small. They add some nice flavor, but if you make them too impactful, players will re-roll their heroes until they get stats they want, which isn't fun. Instead, we try to let the stats you earn over the course of your adventure be much more important. Personality traits also play a large part in event picking, which we'll get into later. That's the core of hero generation. Most of the other interesting stuff happens during the campaign, which brings us to the first choice that players usually encounter: relationships. Wildermyth has rivalry, friendship, and romance relationships that can form between heroes either randomly over time or due to a player choice. Players get really invested in relationships, so we'll often put a choice between all three at the start of our campaigns. Aside from their story impact, relationships also provide combat buffs. Romance makes you deal more damage to enemies that attacked your lover, rivalry gives you bonus crit chance when your rival crits, and friendship has a chance to block attacks if you're standing next to your friend. Heroes can also have children and siblings. The family system came in a bit later in development and is pretty simple in some ways, but it still gives some nice story variation and players really enjoy it. Since Wildermyth is a party-based game, it is okay for some heroes to die or leave the party. Campaigns take place over many years, so you'll see your heroes age and eventually retire. Retirement felt like an important part of Wildermyth's storytelling, but players don't like losing heroes, so we try to mitigate that by granting some experience points when they leave. Death is another thing that we don't want to shy away from, but also didn't want to make too common. Since the point of Wildermyth is largely the heroes, having them die can feel very bad. When you lose all your health in combat, there's a mortal choice mechanic that lets you choose to either be maimed and fall back, often losing an arm or an eye or getting a permanent scar, or to go out in a blaze of glory, dealing a lot of damage or granting a defense buff for your team. If your hero does die, there are a number of comics that address it, with a number that specifically address the deaths of lovers and family. Gear is one of the most important factors for how your hero will play in combat, and for that reason we don't allow swapping weapons between heroes. Gear is soul-bound to the hero who gets it. The gear is theirs and theirs alone. This helps to further characterize the heroes. I've got my hero with their big hammer that smashes enemies, which makes her feel strong and aggressive, and my hero with the bow that refunds an action point when he crits, which makes him feel crafty. If we allowed gear to be swapped around, players would give it to whatever hero it would be most useful to at the time, and weapons would feel separate from the hero. Gear also all shows up on the player rig. Weapons, armor, scarves, bracelets, pendants, cloaks, and more all show up both in combat and during comics. In the case of random loot, this mostly just serves as a visual representation of your hero getting stronger and progressing, similar to aging. For loot from specific events, it also serves as a reminder of those events. We've even got a couple rare cases where specific gear triggers certain events. Wildermyth also has some pets. They aren't technically gear, but they similarly grant heroes buffs and show up along with their hero and serve as a reminder to a specific event that occurred. And lastly, transformations. Transformations are probably one of the most successful types of hero progression in Wildermyth for a couple reasons. They're visually distinct, so every time you see that hero, you're reminded of an important part of their story. They affect combat dramatically, giving you new abilities and often having you use those instead of normal weapons. And there are lots of interesting ways to reference them in story events. Referencing something that's clearly visible on the hero is easy to do, because a player might forget something that their hero did in the past, but they definitely won't forget that their hero has a wolf head. Now that we've talked about what makes heroes unique and memorable, let's talk about how we use that uniqueness. Events are the comics that tell Wildermyth's story. They happen at the start, end, and between chapters, before, after, and sometimes during combat, and some other times. Some of these events are consistent based on which campaign you choose, but most happen randomly, and we refer to this random collection of events as a library of plays, where the heroes are the cast. When you're putting on a play, you need to be sure you have the right number of actors, and that the actors are right for the roles the play requires. The goal here is acknowledging who the heroes currently are and pushing them toward who they can become. To do this, we look at all the events and pick one we have the roles for. These are usually weighted differently depending on how specific they are, so if you've got an event about a wolf hero talking with their parent while walking through a forest, that'll have a much higher weight than an event about two friends chatting, since it's much harder to meet the criteria for. In this way, we try to pick the event that is best suited for the current party of heroes you have. Once we've chosen an event, within that event there are many text and dialogue splits depending on the heroes, and sometimes bigger variations like additional comic panels or choices. So even if you've already seen an event, it's very rarely the exact same twice. We also include some very small events called Tidings that often reference very specific things about characters and are much quicker to create. I'm going to drink some water. Talking is hard. Let's look at an example. Here's a relatively simple event about two heroes talking about what keeps them fighting, which happens while traveling to fight some monsters. The left side here is mostly template. Self is the event, company is the company of heroes, overland tile is the map tile, including things like is this a forest or a field or a swamp. Site is the specific location of the fight, like quarry, library, tower. Party is the specific group of heroes you brought along, foes is the enemy you're facing. All of these can require specific things, like events that only happen in a forest or at a library, or if you're fighting more thuggy. But in this case, we're not making any restrictions there. The right side is where we're doing some actual matching. First, we're saying we need one hero who we'll refer to as hero. Next, we want to pick a different hero that's friends or lovers with the hero. Friend with and lover with return the tier of relationship, which can be up to 5. We score lovers more highly here, so we'll prefer choosing a lover if there is one, and we'll refer to this hero as friend. Next, we want a third hero, whichever one has the highest leader personality stat among the remaining heroes. We're not saying they have to be any specific amount, we're just saying we're just getting the best we can find from what's left, and we'll refer to them as leader. Note that the bolded names hero, friend, and leader here are just names that we're giving the roles. It doesn't actually matter what those names are, the logic of it is all happening in the scoring. Finally, we have optional heroes 4 and 5, and then a lover role that's matched if friend is hero's lover. You can't see it in this view, but there are additional options that allow a role to match the same hero more than once. So now that we've picked an event, let's talk about variations. We pick an event based on the main traits that are required to make the event work, but there are many places within the event where there can be variations based on differences in the heroes, site, monster type, and more. The most common of these variations is a text split, where dialogue or narration will be different depending on who's saying it. In this case, the response to a question about the hero's favorite fruit is different depending on their personality. In the editor, it looks like this. We start with a tag, hero.personality, that tells the game that we're going to split the next text into 11 different options based on personality. Then those options are all written in with a slash between each. There's some context-sensitive text coloring, so you can easily see the extent of the text you're currently working on. There's some breadcrumbing at the bottom, showing information about which specific branch of the split you're working on. And the comic itself is always visible in the editor while you're working on it, and can automatically adjust the stats of the heroes in the comic to match them to the selected text section. There are also some additional tags in the text to set the facial expression of the talking hero, since that's something we often want to change. You may note that writing 11 different responses to one question is a lot of work, especially because, as you can see below, the response to the response is also changing. Earlier in development, there were more cases where we would only have a couple variations, like a bookish or romantic hero might have unique lines, but any other type would say the same thing. But it turns out that writing a lot of 11-way splits was actually pretty important for giving heroes a consistent voice. Getting individual heroes to have a consistent voice is very important for a game that centers itself around memorable heroes, and also presents a lot of challenges. You can't go too over the top with any of the dialogue, because if a hero speaks only in poetry for a bookish split, but then speaks normally for all the rest of the lines, it'll feel out of place. You can't have any caricatures. This also means the relationships between heroes need to be kind of similar. In our case, all the heroes are a friendly group. In the case of the rivalry relationship, the heroes may get on each other's nerves occasionally, but overall are still working together for the common good. We can't have any of our heroes hate each other, because there would be no way to have that happen consistently. Earlier, I mentioned that the second hero of this event could optionally be a lover of the first. That's where another type of variations, unique choices, come into play. Most of the events in Wildermyth have a choice you make at the end, usually between 2 and 4 options. Sometimes the choices grant gear, a combat buff, or relationship points. Sometimes they transform your hero. Sometimes it's just a simple story difference. Some of these choices only show up if you have a specific type of hero in your party. In this case, options 1 and 2 can always happen, but the third only happens if the 2 heroes are lovers. Again, the variations exist largely to acknowledge who the heroes are and what they've done, to make it feel like the events that happened to them aren't just things that occurred and then were gone, but that those events have shaped who they are now, and to tease that any event could, in some way, shape who they'll become in the future. Here's another example. We've got some heroes in the mountains, and we want to present the player with the option of continuing up the mountain or entering a cave. How do the heroes discover that cave? In this case, our friend Xertus is looking around and notices it. His eyes comb the hillside until something catches them. But what if Xertus was a wolf hero? His nose samples the local breezes, and he catches an intriguing scent. As a wolf, he could have just as easily spotted the cave with his eyes, but sniffing it out draws attention to one of his main traits. It encourages the belief in the player that this isn't just a template that any hero could be slotted into. Xertus is doing something that only Xertus could do. Or what if one of the heroes had a pet critter that got distracted by a squirrel and chased it up to the cave? Here's where I'll introduce panel splits. We actually add additional panels to the comic if you have a critter, which is an especially effective way to acknowledge something unique. It does take quite a bit more effort to set up, so we don't do them nearly as often as text splits. Let's look at another example. Say you encounter Winterlock in his icy cave. In addition to thinking what would be fun to acknowledge, like a wolf sniffing or a critter running off, it's often useful to ask yourself what's a trait you would expect to dramatically alter this encounter. In this case, when encountering an icy villain, you might expect something to go differently if you had access to fire. So, we add in a panel split. Winterlock acknowledges the flame-touched hero, bringing her warmth into this place of ice. There's a similar panel split if you have a hero with a pet fire chicken. Then, when we get to the choice portion of the event, we also have a unique choice for the flame-touched hero. Normally, there's a skill check you have to pass, but with Jameta's fire abilities, the interaction can become trivial. It feels satisfying to be rewarded for a big change you decided to make to a hero. A guideline we, or more specifically our lead writer Doug, started following later into development is to try to add variation wherever it would feel weird not to have it. Here's an example with a hero encountering their estranged father. It would feel a bit weird if the father didn't mention that the hero has an animal head that they didn't have the last time they saw each other. The text split here accounts for a bunch of different transformation types. It's only acknowledged in one panel in this case, but that's enough to satisfy most players. This is a magical world where things are weird pretty often, after all. It's also okay, and sometimes easier, to forbid events for certain heroes. We have an event where a hero falls into a hole and can't get out. It felt a little weird if that hero had wings, so we just made it so heroes with wings wouldn't trigger that event. Writing up additional panel splits and choices for it might have been more interesting, but sometimes the effort of reworking something for one specific case is more than the loss of forbidding that case. Lastly, let's talk about Tidings. Tidings are one-line events that happen between chapters during the years of peace between enemy attacks. We show one or two of them per hero, and many are written around specific transformations or follow-up to events. For examples, here are two about transformations, one about carving art with a hook hand, and one that's a follow-up to an event where you decide you're going to take care of an egg. That one also grants some loot, which is a nice perk. It's worth noting that while many changes to heroes happen due to choices the player has made, others don't. Losing a hand and having it being replaced with a hook likely wasn't intentional. Children and relationships can happen randomly without player input. Wildermyth is a game where it often feels like the player is discovering a hero's story while providing a guiding hand, rather than choosing it directly. We don't always have to be acknowledging choices the player made directly. It can be just as impactful to acknowledge things that happened to the hero randomly. Procedurally generated changes to heroes can still be impactful if we handcraft the game's response to them. And now I'm going to pass it over to Jackson to talk about combat.
Thank you, Patrick. So I will be talking about combat, how we handle creating maps, the procedurally generated kind, the handcrafted kind, and then what fills those maps, which are pieces of scenery that help keep things interesting, and then the Mystic class, one of the three main classes of Wildermyth, and how they interact with scenery and how it kind of changes gameplay and keeps things interesting. So right off the bat, ProcGen maps are amazing because we could make a ton of them, and in theory, adding a new one costs basically nothing. We set up the guidelines, and we of course had to fine tune it to make sure nothing would obviously break when you were playing it. But after that point, initially, almost all the maps were procedurally generated. We didn't have, any handcrafted ones, or very few of them. And they were great for a lot of reasons, mostly because once we had the initial method for creating them down, which did take a fair amount of time, there's a lot of development that went into that. Once we had it down, we could create them as we liked. However, we did find that even if you could create small variations within the shape and the pieces of scenery that would show up would be different, they could still look pretty similar visually. And so it didn't really, the goal of the procedural generation was that you wouldn't be playing the same map over and over again, but sometimes it could still feel that way. There was also an issue, and this happened more with some of the nature maps rather than the ones that take place like in towns. It just didn't feel like this was a real part of the world because the way the scenery was positioned was procedural. It wasn't individually hand placed, so they didn't feel like special places. They just felt like some random spot that had this scenery, and it made the fights feel a little less special. The building ones were a little nicer for this because we could work in some of the site information. So like Patrick talked about, sites could be forges, fonts, workshops. And, if there's a tower full of forge equipment, it does feel a little bit more like a forge than, a forest area that's full of forest items. The other nice part of the tower maps was that when trying to fit some of Wildermyth's larger monsters onto the procedurally generated maps, it could be kind of an issue if there just wasn't enough room. But the tower maps could actually scale in size based on how many monsters we were going to include and how much space they would really take up. There were also occasionally issues with the feel of some of them. So for instance, with maps like this, something that could happen pretty often was if you had really big monsters, they would have a hard time fitting through the smaller pathways. And so you wouldn't really get the same sensation of heroes exploring a map, fighting, discovering new pockets of monsters. It would just be the heroes stand there and fight as the monsters pour towards them, which could be quite fun, but wasn't what this type of map was specifically designed for. And so it could feel a little bit odd when you played it enough. Then that takes us to handcrafted maps. Now, handcrafted maps had a lot of benefits. They felt way more customized. We could create these very, very carefully constructed areas that felt like real parts of the world. They were critical for any kind of significant story moments or boss fights. And it was honestly just a lot of fun. We got to kind of flex our design muscles a little bit and create interesting challenges, which with the type of scenery we presented and the kind of pacing of where we wanted monsters to spawn. And it just meant that we could do a lot more and be a lot more intentional with the maps we were creating. The main downside of ProcGen maps is they are beautiful, but they also take a long time to make. There's a lot of design and iteration and back and forth that goes into them because people have different opinions on gameplay, and you have to play test each one to make sure it feels really good. Other benefits of it, however, were if you wanted multiple stages for a boss fight or you wanted unique pieces of scenery, you could do that here, whereas it wouldn't make sense if a specific enemy's banner randomly appeared in certain maps. However, here you could place it specifically and really intentionally and make it feel like their base. Other benefits were you could control spawn regions. So you could, if you wanted to really directly control the flow of the fight, you could do that a lot more easily. You could make sure that there were areas that were kind of larger, meant for bigger interactions with lots of enemies, and then smaller kind of hallways or pathways that were really just meant for the heroes to kind of make their way through, maybe have a small breather between these engagements. Again, they took a long time to make, and especially if we wanted to include unique mechanics, it could make it more difficult to test, and it just generally took longer. However, other benefits of it were if we wanted to have unique goals, as all of the procedural generated maps, or almost all of them, the main goal was just kill all the enemies. And for handcrafted ones, we could have specific goals like trying to destroy specific pieces of scenery or trying to, escape a certain part of the map that we just couldn't do with ProcGen ones. So the other big thing I'm going to talk about, or one of the other big things, is scenery. So it was based on the type of monster you're fighting, the biome you're in, and the sites. And so this was super, super useful because it meant that even if there were kind of small variations in a map's shape, that alone wouldn't make it feel interesting or different. However, if we had what actually fills the scene change based on the environment you're in or what you're fighting, it could feel a lot more interesting and keep things a lot fresher. And so as you can see, there's an example of environment scenery. You're in the hills. It's this kind of mossy stone. The monster scenery, in this case, you're fighting the Gorgons. So you have these stone kind of calcified, petrified tentacles. And then for site scenery, you have this beautiful kind of ring of stones and a font water fountain. This, for reference, was a handcrafted map. And it was meant to kind of evoke the idea of this mystical font in the mountains. Scenery also served as cover, so it had mechanical uses. If you hid your heroes behind them, or if there were monsters hiding behind them, they would be more difficult to hit, and this varied in quality. However, we made sure that it would never be too annoying, because if you make an attack against an enemy and then you have an ally who's flanking them, your ally is guaranteed to hit them as long as you've tried to hit them from an opposite angle. And this was really a core part of Wildermyth's combat, and where a lot of the strategy came in. As for instance, hunters, if they attacked with a dagger, could deal double damage when flanking. But this was just another way that scenery was really, really critical for the actual flow of combat. And then we come to mystics. So mystics are where the scenery really, really shines, because the way they work is, instead of being a traditional caster where they just throw fireballs, they put a tiny piece of their soul into an item, and then based on the elements that make up that item, they gain new abilities. So for instance, if they interfuse with a bookshelf, they may be able to kind of pull the knowledge out of books and shove it in someone's mind, or they could cause pieces of wood to explode in brilliant displays. And this meant that as the scenery changed, the abilities available to your mystics, who generally would make up at least like a third of your party, those would change as well. And so it meant not only were you looking at something different, but you were having to approach each combat a little bit differently. And you could upgrade your mystics in specific ways to make sure they had abilities that were better used around like human-created objects, like mechanisms, or maybe they were more of a forest mystic who could use trees and water more effectively. But this just helped keep things feeling interesting as we would cycle through enemy types and scenery, and the maps would be changing constantly. So it was a lot of kind of little changes that would adjust how combat would feel overall. So yeah, another example, there's one ability where you could interfuse with a tree and then teleport to it, which I really enjoyed, and it would let you kind of turn invisible for a little bit. Mystics were my favorite class by far in the game. And then this takes us to the Overland map. Sorry. And the Overland map had a couple different subtle ways it influenced gameplay through the procedural generation. So each time a map was created, the tiles would have kind of a rough proportion of each biome. So there was a lot of grassland, a lot of forests, and then fewer mountains and swamps. And every time you explored one of these areas, there was a chance to get a comic that was based in that location. Another thing that was important is, as the game would progress, the map would get more and more full, until finally, by the end of the your final chapter, it would be fully completed. You could see everything, even if you hadn't explored everything. And then another important component were mountains, as they would slow down monsters that would kind of be launching raids against your outposts. The other part of tiles that were critical was that you could build sites on them that would give you resources, and those resources could be spent to buy upgrades and weapons for your heroes. This meant that you had to keep an eye on, what resources were plentiful. If you had lots of places to build forges nearby, great, you can build axes, swords easily. But if you're lacking them, you would have to go for weapons that had more wood involved, or more spell thread, or things of that nature. So again, these were kind of less obviously significant ways in which the procedural generation influenced gameplay. But over time, you would find that you would really feel the lack of certain resources, and the way a map would be generated, where rivers and mountains would appear, could really shift the way you played, even if you were playing the same campaign. Also because when raids would be launched, you kind of had to defend your towns, or else they would just die. And so if you didn't have people positioned properly, it could make it really difficult to actually keep playing the game and not just lose out of hand. But yeah, so Patrick, please, what are our main takeaways from this?
All right, yeah. So takeaways. When you're making randomly generated heroes, give them lots of memorable traits. When possible, show those traits visually, and make sure those heroes have a consistent voice. When making events that utilize those heroes, handcraft stories that you pick based on the hero's traits, and add additional acknowledgments of hero traits within those stories. It's gonna be a lot of work. That's just the unfortunate truth of it.
Yeah, and same thing with combat maps. You can make handcrafted maps, and they can be furnished with proc-gen scenery. So even within handcrafted maps, they could still vary a little bit. But again, that takes a lot of time. However, the feeling of having your heroes interact differently with their environment and different scenery made them feel more unique, especially as you're playing the game for longer and longer periods of time, and you have bigger and different parties. You still remember the character who was really good at, messing around with rocks or something. Another thing that you've probably seen in a lot of different talks is that proc-gen can often be seen as this way to as a force multiplier for smaller teams to be able to put out a lot more content. But hopefully this talk and likely others have shown you that yes, you can make a lot of content with it, but I think we all have a feeling that it doesn't mean it's going to be good. And the time it takes to really hone it into something of high quality is something you have to really consider as you're making these decisions to use procedural generation in your stuff.
And that is all. Thank you so much. If you're looking for more Wildermyth talks, I'm going to put Nate's GDC 2022 talk, Getting Players Emotionally Invested in Procedural Characters in Wildermyth, on the obelisk.
Yeah, nice. Thank you so much. This is awesome to see how much structure is behind the wow. See, procedurally generates all these stories perfectly, easily. There's a lot of intentional choices made there. Just a quick question. I think we have time for one here that someone posted. Dr. G asked, what were your biggest challenges building the editor, and were there cases where core systems changed and you had to revise your data structure or editor for it?
I think the data structure probably changed a lot during the start, but by the time I came onto the team, it largely stayed the same. We just added onto it. The editor, though, did go through a lot of changes. So at the start, like none of that context-sensitive highlighting or anything like that was in there, and you weren't able to like click on a piece of text to see that show up in the comic. There's a whole bunch of autofill stuff that happens now to like show you all the roles that you have available. Prior to that, it was basically just write in a text editor and like hope that you didn't miss one of your slashes, and then re-roll the comic a bunch of times to see if you can get enough variations to be confident that it'll work.
Yeah, I imagine once the narrative person gets in there and is like, oh gosh, it sure would be nice with a little, just some highlights and some autocomplete and that sort of thing.
When I was first designing the maps as well, I would basically use an ASCII art editor to put in like letters and characters to indicate what kind of tiles I wanted to make. It was very difficult. Once tools were added, it became much, much easier to make handcrafted stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thanks again for the wonderful talk. Definitely post your other one on the obelisk. And thanks for joining us again this year.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all.